Yes, hello everyone. I'm Peter Bernegger. I'm representing over 1,500 volunteers across the state of Wisconsin. And, they range from retirees to housewives. We have accountants, PhDs, engineers, data analysts, IT specialists, a whole range of other professions. And I can announce that we're growing extremely rapidly still, where we're going to be adding upwards to 4,000 new members in the next month, depending how fast we can process them. So we had a different group that saw what we're doing and is joining in. I would consider this an interim report because we're constantly working on this daily, weekly, monthly. Our group does have upwards to $60,000 worth of WEC voter registration lists, including 4 statewide ones.
For dates,
yeah. And 4 dates, and then also various counties that we've purchased over time and some custom orders. And we do have access to, we affectionately call it a supercomputer. It is working with Jay Valentine out of the Fractal Programming out of Austin, Texas, and they've been very gracious to us to be allowing us to use it. So they're in the fraud detection business already. You've heard Mr. Valentine's testimony, and we are expanding on what we found here in Wisconsin.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
All right. And today I will be using rounded numbers and would like to show you what we found to date. First up is what we're investigating are these 4 main categories about the election on November 3rd, but also this is now spilling backwards to 2018 election and elections primaries since, where we're also finding very interesting information. And of course I have here the city of Milwaukee, the state databases, and we'll get into that because that's the main one today, in fact the only one. The CTCL, the Zuckerbergs, the National Voter at Home we're looking into, and then the miscellaneous category at least is the human meals, the drop boxes, the voting machines, and indefinitely confined. So the one that I'll be covering today is number 2, is the state databases, and what I mean by that is the WisVote statewide database, My Vote registration, ERIC system is tied into this, along with the DMV's role in verifying electors. So
we affectionately refer to the DMV as the DOT here, Department of Transportation, just so we all stay on the same page.
All right. And this gets to the crux of the problem. While our group of citizens inherently don't trust our election systems to begin with, because this is the WEC website called Badge of Voters, and you can see that the total count of registrants on here is 7.1 million registrants. And it gets to the problem that we only have 4 million adults in the state of Wisconsin. So we're approaching, in the 7.13 million number on the voter rolls, that grows almost daily. It never ends. It rarely goes down. It dropped slightly when they sent out the 4-year postcards, and then it shot right back up, and it's the highest that I've ever seen it. Okay, and it's even worse than this because there's the 4 million adults in Wisconsin. Not all of them register, not all of them vote. We're really down around about 3.6 million, 3.7 million.
So just for clarification, that 7.13 in the state of Wisconsin, we keep active and inactive voters on that rolls, right? When you said the 7.13.
Correct. I'm going to be getting into that also.
And I'm sorry if I'm trying over to you. I apologize. But the historical record of keeping people who are deceased, left, all of that is part of that 7.3 on the rolls.
Correct. And,
okay.
And this is where the problems begin. First off, there's statutes that we do consult with attorneys where they're stating is that WEC is required to maintain an accurate and efficient voter rolls. It's in Wisconsin statutes, and it also requires in the National Voter Rights Act and the federal law. And WEC has admitted back on September 8th in the hearing, I think in this room, that the WisVote, the statewide voter database, has never been audited. It's been in existence, to our knowledge, for 16 years, and it's never been audited. WEC has repeatedly told us, trust us, and that's in the newspapers, that's been on these hearings that they put on themselves. So WEC's system that we use to register our voters and cast our ballots, again, is the WISVote. That's the statewide voter registration database, and you're going to see parts of that here today. The next is the MyVote. MyVote is the online registration where you can register to vote. eBooks is where you register the day of when you walk into the polling station. Not all have eBooks, but some municipalities do. ERIC is a nonprofit that the state of Wisconsin is required to be part of. Their supposed mantra is to keep our voter rolls clean or help keep our voter rolls clean. And the DMV, which is now the DOT, the DOT has a role in verifying our electors and our voters. Okay? And for those watching, now this is a typical voter registration list that we purchased as part of it, at least the data is from it, from WEC, right, from the Badger voter site. And just so people understand what we're looking at, and column A is a voter ID number. The next one is the last name, and we have a first name, middle initial, telephone number, it's an optional additive, the physical address where the voter lives, city, state, zip code. And when you have almost double the number of registrants than there are alive, active adults in the state, you start having problems, okay? Here's one. There are almost 4,300 people registered in our state with the zip code 99999. Now, approximately 2 weeks ago, we contacted WEC in writing. We were in contact with them all the time. And we said, hey, let's work together, let's fix this. Here's what we found. Would you please fix it? Didn't hear anything back. Okay? Now, there's nobody who can argue that having 9999 zip code, which does not exist, to have 4,300 people on a voter registration list. Okay? So I'd love to hear from WEC so we could fix items such as this. Here's the next problem. The National Voter Registration Act says quite clearly that deceased are supposed to be removed from the voter rolls upon information provided to the municipal clerk or to WEC. Okay? Right now, we have 625,000 dead people on the voter rolls statewide, and that number grows every single week. Okay? It doesn't stop. Someday, if you keep the current policy, you're going to have 10 million dead people on the Wisconsin state voter roll. We're asking for those to be taken off. Now, WEC has stated that they have to keep a historical record, but that statute does not say they have to keep it on the same active voter list where people are casting ballots from, or using the system to cast ballots in each election. So you could create very simply a separate system, completely a new server, put these historical records on there, and everything would be nice and clean for our elections coming up, such as next week. Here's what you also get when you have 7.2 million people registered, total active and inactive. This is the city of Milwaukee numbers, and you can see where we have a tremendous amount of inactive registered voters. Now, this gets to the crux of a problem. We know, we have seen it with our own eyes. You can switch an inactive person to active with 2 clicks. We have seen it with our own eyes. It opens the door to fraud. Anybody in there, you're talking electronic computer coding. Anybody gets access to the WISVote system, you can go in there, you could flip 100,000 people, vote them, flip them back, or take them off. And nobody would ever know, unless you're looking intensely for it, okay? This happens to be also the city of Milwaukee. There is an issue with the 1918 registrants, if you've heard that or not. There's upwards to 1 million of them in our state where they registered 1918, and WEC says on their website their official position is that this is a system that when they switch from paper to electronic, they didn't know some of the registration dates, so they used default dates. Well, the problem with that is, in 2020, before the election, we have found several people who were registered in the year 2020, that's when they registered, but they defaulted in 1918. So at the minimum, there's a coding problem in there that they need to fix, okay? Instead of dismissing it, they need to fix that. And the same here, we've got 66,000 deceased and 20,000 undeliverable mail. Now, WEC sent the mailings out. WEC, I should say, probably the City of Milwaukee Elections Commission did. And they know that the people are undeliverable mailing address. So what they do is they keep them on the list, which is wrong. Because again, even if they're inactive, there's the possibility you can go in there and flip them from inactive to active. We've seen it done. Okay? We've been in multiple clerks' offices, county and municipal. This is what you also get when you have such an inflated registration list. This is a specific 2-bedroom apartment. You have 26 registrants. Now, we don't know, but it raises the question, how many of the 26 were given absentee ballots? I'd like to know. How do you have 26 people registered in a 2-bedroom apartment? We found tens of thousands of these. We have them in our possession of pictures, addresses, the number of registrants, and the size of the apartment complex or the residential home. Here's one in La Crosse, another example. 16 units, 290 registrants. How many absentee ballots went to there? Who knows? Here's one in Outagamie County of a single-family home, and we found tens of thousands of single-family homes like this. It's 19 registrants to that address. Kenosha County. Here's an address that hasn't existed for 10 years. They changed the road, they changed the address. Still to this day, there's 359 registered voters at an address that does not legally exist for 10 years. We went into the property tax records and checked this down in Kenosha. Now, this is directly from a list that we purchased, and it is public information. If you walk into a municipal clerk's office, you can request this as a public records inspection. And here's a major problem is with the WISVOTE system, with the whole system, is there's no first name. How did these people, there's pages and pages of these. How did these people get registered? Where's our verification from Eric, who we're paying money to? Where's the verification from the DNV? Okay. What people do you know that don't have a first name? How did they get a registration number? There's pages and pages and pages of them. This isn't just a clerical error. Go to this one, look at the last name. You have people registered without a last name. Granted, there's only 3, but how could that happen? And then you look down and you see dash marks, you see slashes, you see numbers mixed in with the last name. There's also pages and pages of these. Now, once we obtained the statewide list and we got it loaded into the supercomputer, we found these within a couple of weeks. This has been here for 16 years. How come it hasn't been fixed? Here's another one. Now, this particular one is the ID number. If you look at this column here, here's an ID number, a sign of WD4. ID number of 7, or I'm sorry, S. My eyes are going. Here's one of a apostrophe. I can't even tell if it's apostrophe or a period. A U, a Q, the word new. That's a registration number. D, B, A, 993, 92. How did these get approved? Because maybe a clerk did do a clerical error, but then how did the DMV miss this? How did the ERIC system miss this? Here we have registrations without an address. I have the same question. On the behalf of our 1,500 citizens who found this, how do they get a registration number without an address? Any software programmer would tell you, you would not allow an entry like this unless something was entered into this column, into this cell right here. You wouldn't let the system process it. But I'm back to the same central question. How come Eric missed this? How come the DMV missed this? How come WEC never knew about this? Now we get to faulty addresses. There's pages of these. We have 0 Airport Road, Menasha, Wisconsin. Okay, we have 0 First Highway 12. This is all statewide. We have half a parenthesis, no, in parentheses, apostrophe quotation mark. That's what I'm looking for. We have a quotation mark as an address. Where is our system of WisVote, ERIC, MyVote, DMV? How did they not catch these? These are simply digital entries. So anyone who has access to the system, and we know now, we were told there's 3,400 FIDO keys which are needed to access the WisVote system. Were dispersed across the state of Wisconsin. First, there's only 1,900 clerks, including county clerks. And of course, there are some deputy clerks. But we know instances where there was 3 people in the office of the clerk's office. They were sent 10 FIDO keys. Anyone with access, whether you have a FIDO key or not, if you have a FIDO key and you're a bad actor, or you hack into the system, all you have to do is do digital entries. That's all these are. You could flip 100,000 2 seconds with a USB stick. And that's why we're asking for fix the inflated registration list of the 7.2 million, because they can be used because they have a name, an address, and a voter ID, and that's what you need to cast a ballot. Okay? So there, someone is using, we don't know who, someone is using our systems, our databases, to cast illegal ballots, and that's what I'm going to get into next coming up here. This is a ballot cast. We call it at this point in time an illegally cast ballot. The person doesn't exist. Now, if we made a mistake anywhere in our analysis, please let us know. We'll admit it, we'll apologize, and we'll take appropriate action to correct it for the next time. But we cannot find this person. If somebody can, please let us know. This person is still active as of the date of this list, which was August of last year. A ballot was cast November 3rd, and it's in a village in North Fond du Lac. We have found thousands of these. We have the names, the addresses, the voter ID numbers. I'm going to show you some of them. Now, here's a problem with we find with WEC. WEC says, do we have duplicate, somebody asked them, do we have duplicate voter registration numbers? And they say no. So all WEC voter registration numbers are unique. And then they explain why it can't happen. Well, here's one. Here's the same person. Of course, there's the county. There's a voter ID number, different numbers, same name, same address, same city. Both are active. Both cast ballots. You have an illegally cast ballot here, and we were just told that can't happen because all the voter ID numbers are unique. What it tells us is that WEC never looked, or they don't know how to look, and I don't know which one's worse, to be honest with you. Here's another one. The top 2, it's all the same person. The top 2 different ID numbers, both active, both of these ID numbers cast a ballot. Same person, same address. You got 2 actives, you've got 2 different voter ID numbers. Here's another one. Now, JG voted twice. The name is not given because this particular person has been referred to a criminal prosecution, to the appropriate law enforcement. Here's another one. It's out of Lodi, same person, same address. I'm just repeating myself, of course. Different ID numbers, active, and ballots. 2 ballots were cast in the same name, same address. Here's another one. Here's another one. Okay, now, we've been finding this somewhat. I don't have a number to share with you yet, but I would say right now it's over 500 across the state. You get 2 different IDs, same name, first name, and then 1 letter's different. Sometimes it's the middle initial, sometimes it's the last letter of the name. Same address, active. 2 ballots were cast. We could not find the Janet Nunn fax. We don't believe that she exists. Okay. Now I'm going to show you how we do this. There's actually several different ways, but this is one. This is a process that we developed over the last 6 months. You can see we go into extreme detail. We try to do verifications, anywhere from 3 to 5 verifications, depending on the situation. And if you look in the last column, and I know the print's small, these are saying what was found for each one of these voters. Now, these lists contain, we have hundreds of lists. These lists contain this particular one, about 350. I believe, if I remember correctly, about 50% of these, of the 350, we put in the category of a phantom voter. And what we mean by a phantom voter is an illegally cast ballot, okay? For one reason or another, and I'll give you, show you some examples. How many we found? So it's not a clerical error. We have found tens of thousands that we have documentation on that we can show you, and we're finding more every week. And we're getting better at it every week. Here's the different types of errors that we're finding. They're self-explanatory, I believe, but I'll read through them quick. Is voted twice in a state. That happens to be one of the lower categories. Voted in 2 states. I'm sorry, the other way around. Voted in 2 states happens to be a lower category. A lot of people always think people are double voting across state lines. That number at this point we found is 165 in the state. So it's concerning, but it's not gargantuan. Person doesn't exist. We're finding a lot of that, fake names. Wrong person at the address, and this includes where a person didn't live there ever, or a person hasn't lived there for 3, 4, 5 years. Person moved long before the election, which is tied into number 4. We found people the oldest one so far, most are anywhere from 6 months to 5 years. I think the oldest one is someone 2003 has not lived at that property. And we will go in and check tax records to verify our work. Person's name and address used without their knowledge. We've come across people across the entire state constantly telling us they went in to vote in person on November 3rd and they were told, hey, you already voted. And they'll show them the poll book and say, well, we got a mark by your name. You voted absentee. And the person says, no, I didn't. Non-existent address. Got a couple examples of those coming up. We did come across, surprisingly, a fair number of ladies who married and they used both names, or somebody used their names and they didn't know it. It's a definite possibility. 1 letter change, as I showed an example earlier, and then there's several other ways that, actually too many to list, to be honest with you. Okay, this is an example of an address here in Madison. I believe it's on 334 Francis Street. I might have the number wrong. And it's at one apartment building. It has 1,600 people registered at a one apartment building. Okay? Now, the more concerning aspect is, of those who live there, 656 voted in November 3rd election. It's 102% turnout. And if our math is wrong on this, please let me know. We don't want bad information. And I mentioned this one. This is a place in western Wisconsin. No one lives there. 113 ballots were cast out of that location. And we know the names and voter ID numbers, of course. Here's Rodriguez. This is a very common one where people move, and by quite a bit of time, not by 10, 20, 30, 40 days before the election. But they moved in August, the gentleman did, and he voted in the November 3rd election, but he was living at a different address. Here's an interesting one, is that we have never found this person to be living in the state of Wisconsin. He lives in right on the border in Minnesota, but he cast a ballot in Wisconsin. Here's more on a county level. Now this is Rock County numbers. This is by volunteers who spent the time and their own money to research this. And generally you crisscross back and forth, but they started with 3,420 ballots. And we've done this for numerous counties in the state, by the way. And what, in the end, jump into the end result, found 5.6% that we're categorizing as illegally cast ballots. And that is broken down by, which comes as 192. We triple verified them. And out of the 192, it was 178 moved well before the election took place, and had a different legal address. And 14 voters we cannot find. And again, we have all the names, addresses, voter ID numbers. So if you extrapolate that over Rock County alone, you're looking at 4,795 illegally cast ballots in one county. Now, even if we're off by 50%, which I know we're not, because I go over these numbers every day for the last 14 months, if you go 50% of that number for one county, you're like 165,000 illegally cast ballots in the state of Wisconsin. And how they're doing it. This one way, this is up in St. Clair County, and if you look at the statements below here are based on this single city of Hudson. If you look from 2012, the population grew by 10% up to 2020. These are U.S. government numbers. The number of registrants increased 128%. We have been finding this all over. Waukesha County, blue counties, red counties, doesn't matter. North, south, east, west. We've been finding inflated voter registrations everywhere. E-books. This is something we kind of came across by chance. And a problem that we have, and we're asking you to look into it or fix it, is WEC has recently entered an agreement with the DMV or the DOT to not receive signatures. And of course, on the e-books registrations in particular, let alone my vote, it's very hard when you're holding a pad, all of us have done it, and try to sign. Your signature doesn't come out like it normally would if you're sitting at a desk and signing a piece of paper. But they've entered an agreement to avoid looking at the signatures. Our basic first question is why? Why did they do that? Now, here's the problem with e-books. Here's the same person, same address, all active. Look at the different registration numbers. We have checked and confirmed. This is a registration done by ebooks. It happened all on the same day, April 21, 2020, or 2021, it should be. Again, where is our system of verification of ERIC, of the DMV, DOT, of WEC itself? This person got assigned, 6 voter ID numbers, probably within a few minutes. And they're all active yet, well after the election. Here's another one. There's David Jensen. This was ebooks registering. He has a different ID number, 28 ID numbers. He got assigned 28 ID numbers, probably within a few minutes, because of the ebook system. Now this one's more interesting yet, is Anthony. Same situation. He's registered, I think, 25 times through ebooks again, and he has 25 different voter ID numbers. And 2 of these are active. This one's active, this one's active. Now, here's a mistake I made, is this person also went through ebooks, because we checked with the clerk, like the other ones, and here's the different ID numbers that Andrew was assigned. Now, typically, when this says the date as it is, WEC is telling us that they cast a ballot. Okay, now the clerk was kind enough to go check the poll books on this particular election, and she says she's confirmed that only 1 vote was accepted by this person. However, I'll point out, he still has all these ID numbers, still to this day, to our knowledge. Now, I'm going to show you some more of what we're calling phantom voters, how we start with a list like this. There's something concerning. Maybe the address and name don't match up. Maybe we can't find the person. So we start with a list like this. Then we do a deep dive into it. And this is where we get up to sometimes 5 verifications that we're checking on from various sources. From easy ones like Facebook up to the U.S. Postal Service, which you have to pay money for. Okay, big money for, by the way. And what we come out of these is, here's what we're internally calling the category of fraud. These we're alleging are duplicate voters. These we're alleging are invalid addresses at the time of the election. And these are not available, so we'd say these should be good, solid legal votes. Now, when we come off of these lists like this again, we're coming up, once we run through the first step, we got an 8-step process. Once we come out of the first 1 or 2 steps, we're finding up over 50% of these are being flagged as illegally cast ballots of one sort or another. And we don't know who's doing it. It's probably not the person who's the name. It's probably some bad guys that are using these names to cast illegal ballots. But this exposes our current system. Something's wrong. Somebody's in there. Somebody's doing something wrong, casting illegal ballots. Here's another way we verify. We'll send out, and we'll see we have a lot of these returned to senders where the person never lived there. But yet there's a ballot shown being cast from WEC's database. We are finding from government documents, state and federal, that most of the illegally cast ballots are originating, the registrations are originating from MyVote. And when you think about it, MyVote is a system where someone can sit in a computer from anywhere in the world and register, and you have no idea who they are. You can get a fake address, a fake ID. You can get use an old ID that's modified somehow. So you could have somebody sit anywhere, Bulgaria, and they could be using MyVote to register. And again, it gets back to the base premise. You need a name, address, and voter ID number to cast a ballot. And where do you get that? You get it from MyVote, WisVote, eBooks. Now the DOT, I'm supposed to be saying. It's all been publicized many times. They had a 4.7% failure rate. I mean, they're not sound very large at first, and what that means, I should clarify, that means is that there's a certain amount of voters who are allowed to cast a ballot in November 3rd election that were not verified or could not be verified by the DOT, okay? And how many was that? 46,000. Now, we all know that the official reported results that Joe Biden won by 20,000 votes. But we have 46,000 people who voted, and they were not verified by our system. That calls for a full investigation. We have also found, using the supercomputer, there's more than 1.5 million illegally registered voters in our state. Now, we're saying illegal because either something doesn't, there's a mismatch, in short, and there's 12 different ways that it can happen. One is, I'll show you. Here's an example. Here's a location, apartment building in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and you can see the physical address, and these registrants provided their apartment number. But here we have 4 who didn't. Now, where's our chain of custody of an absentee ballot going to those addresses with an apartment number? How does a postal carrier, that's the building, how does a postal carrier walk up to this apartment building? There's no apartment number on the absentee mailing, on the ballot that's being mailed to the resident. How does that postal carrier know who to deliver the ballot to? There's well over 500,000 in this situation like this that we've found and we've identified. In the state statute, I believe it's 6.33, I can't remember the subsection, requires that the person's legal residence is used in their registration. And I'm back to our same old question. How did Eric miss this? How did the DOT miss this? Do the people have defective driver's licenses? Are they registered without their true legal address? All right. Here's another example of some illegally registered people who have moved, people who have received, been sent a postcard, and the postcard gets bounced back to the clerk or to WEC. These numbers add up to about 160,000 just for Rock County. And deceased are supposed to be taken off according to the National Voting Rights Act after once somebody identifies that someone died. So again, these add up to roughly 160,000 for one county that's not a real large county that should not be on the voter rolls. Here's another way. We've identified 3,713 people registered to a United States post office. Now, when you add in FedEx and UPS virtual mailboxes, we're approaching 5,000 people who are registered to a non-legal resident address. And I'll show you an example. This is Colby, Wisconsin Post Office. There are people who registered and cast ballots from this address, and obviously they don't sleep there. And I'm sounding like a broken record, but again, why didn't Eric, WEC, WisVote, MyVote, and the DOT catch this? This really means the DOT is probably registering, issuing driver's licenses to people living to addresses of U.S. Post Office buildings. If you have that quantity of number, this isn't a one or two mistake. We have identified 5,000 suspected fake voters. That's what we're working on now. That's why we're calling this a interim report. We've identified them by name, address, ID, voter ID, and the reason why we're suspicious. At this point in time, we have already confirmed tens of thousands of fake voters, of illegally cast ballots, and I'm speaking about the November 3rd election. And think of how that would affect the down ballot voting also. We're talking senators, congressmen, local elections. It's affecting all the ballots. Now, to give you a better idea of that number, we're waiting for confirmation from one particular source on top of the tens of thousands, which will shoot this number to well over 50,000 illegally cast ballots that we can prove. Now it brings up ERIC. Those who don't know, ERIC is a nonprofit based out of Washington, D.C. We're required by statute, state statute, to be a member. It was passed, I believe, in 2015. Now, what ERIC says, per their website, that their sole mission is assisting states to improve the accuracy of their rolls and also increase access to the voter registration for all citizens. Here's one problem we have with ERIC. In their bylaws, they bar the exchanging of information about illegal aliens. How can you keep your voter rolls clean if you bar information between states? There's about 29 states, who maybe a couple more who belong to ERIC.
31.
31? But the 31 states can't share information about illegal aliens moving around the United States. The other worrisome part, very worrisome part, everybody in this room has their most private information being held by ERIC. They're based out of Washington, D.C. The guy who runs it is out of Olympia, Washington. He has every one of ours: name, address, driver's license, birth date, last 4 years social, when you voted, how you voted, meaning absentee or at the polls. And every 60 days, ERIC gets the statewide voter database for free. Well, us citizens have to pay $12,500. Now, if you take that information, it's very easy to figure out your entire Social Security number. I can figure out any of your Social Security numbers in 5 minutes, your full number. And how secure is ERIC's database? Does anybody know? It's sitting in Washington, D.C., we think. We don't even know where the server is. And this is the most disturbing about ERIC. This is from their bylaws. When they identify somebody that they want to have registered in our state, they tell us, they tell WEC, and they tell the clerks, directly to the clerks, we have documentation on that. They tell them that you have to contact that person. We have to spend our own time and money, our own research sources. Us in Wisconsin, we have to spend that time and money to go find this person and encourage them and ask them to register to vote. I don't think that's the purpose of WEC or clerks or ERIC. That's for the candidates, the political parties, the PACs, and anybody else who wants to get into politics. But ERIC can't be a nonprofit, independent source that's supposed to be helping keeping our voter rolls clean while they're registering people. And the question is, it begs, who are they registering? Are they registering all Democrats? Are they registering all Republicans? Does anybody know the answer? Are they being selective about it? Why are they involved in our registrations? State statute 7.15 says it's up to the municipal clerks Not somebody sitting in Washington, D.C. telling us how to spend our money and who to go register. And it snowballs on top of itself. So coming up to the 2020 November 3rd election, what's the one report that WEC gets from Eric? One report, right? Eligible residents who are not registered to vote. We checked. That's the only report they got from Eric. So here's Eric and WEC working hand in hand to go register people to vote. That's not why they exist. Especially when you look at all the errors and mistakes that we saw previously in the previous slides that I showed. And of course, it snowballs again. David Becker founded Eric. He also founded SEER. Eric backwards. SEER took $70 million from Zuckerberg for the 2020 election. How can Eric be impartial? You have the same people taking money from Zuckerberg, and some of that money came to Wisconsin. Our snowball gets bigger. Eric is paid in part by us citizens having to pay the $12,500 to look at our own voter rolls. And you heard Attorney Dan Eastman testify, Nevada charges $30. Part of that money of the $12,500 goes to fund Eric. So we citizens have to pay Eric by law to tell us how to spend more money and who to register that they want registered. On top of that, again, the beef we have with the $12,500, we have the emails from CTCL, the National Vote at Home, Mark Spitzer Rubenstein, that they had free access to the WIS vote on a daily basis, almost real time. We have those emails in our possession. So people out of Chicago, Washington, D.C., they get our list for free, and the poor citizens of Wisconsin are stuck paying $12,500. And by the way, I'm going to clarify, I sent public records requests in asking if CTCL and National Vote at Home were charged anything for that WIS vote data. The response was no. So I have that in proof in writing that they were given the data for free when state statute requires that they be charged for it. Bigger snowball yet. We have the NCSL out of Colorado in our elections. We have Hillary Hall, who's tied to the DNC, out of Illinois. Zuckerberg out of California. Brennan Law Center out of New York. We have the emails. Why are all these people in our elections? Are we too stupid in Wisconsin to run our own elections? David Becker and Eric out of Washington, D.C. Rubenstein out of New York City. CTCL out of Illinois. And WEC software, despite what Megan Wolf has said, is not made here in Wisconsin. We are finding that it's subbed out to who knows where all over the world, including London, England. And then what they do, they sub it out. Our programming could very easily be done in India, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Russia, who knows where it is. And that's based on the invoices we obtained from WEC of who they're paying to have their programming done. Why are all these people in our elections? Why is there money in our election? Their money in our elections. Now, back to Eric. State of Louisiana just dropped Eric about 10 days ago. They investigated him. They found what we did and more, and they dropped him. I have it on good authority that Arizona is be dropping Eric because they found the same thing. Florida's investigating. They're going to be pushing to drop Eric. Eric just lost a big federal lawsuit in Washington, D.C. They found that the conditions that were imposed by Eric's bylaws are illegal. we're advocating to drop Eric immediately. It's a waste of money. We've proven today in the previous slides, they're not finding or cleaning up the voter rolls. And it gets down to it's a registration scam that they find the particular people that they want to register in your state, and then they send it to us, to WEC and to the clerks, and we have to spend our time and money to go find those people and try to register them. It's not their function. Now back on WEC, and we're wrapping up here. We know that WEC broke countless laws. Many times they use so-called quote guidance documents, and then they just assume or pretend it's law, and it hasn't gone through your typical process, the state legislature, the governor, public notices, and we're asking for this to stop, and here's a list of some of them, such as WEC telling the clerks to stop counting the night of the election. They didn't have authority to do that. WEC declared drop boxes were legal. No, they're not. Waukesha County judge just ruled that they're not. WEC just declared clerks can clear the ballots. There's no state statute that says they can do that. And the list you can see is self-explanatory on the other ones. And I wonder if our 1,900 roughly clerks know that WEC's guidance, when it's illegal, places them in legal jeopardy. If the clerks take WEC's guidance that's illegal and implements it, a citizen like me can come along, file a lawsuit against them, or bring criminal charges. Has anybody told the clerks that they're in legal jeopardy following bogus guidance, so-called guidance from WEC? I doubt it. I think we've seen that WEC is a disaster. You have to fire the management, revamp the whole system. Somebody's in our system, WISVote, MyVote, ERIC, DMV, DOT. Somebody's in there. They're adding names. They're adding fake voters. They're casting illegal ballots by the tens of thousands that we have documentation to back up. And we're calling for a full investigation immediately, because we have elections that never stop. We have them next week. And all those fake voters are sitting on those registration lists right now that we're going to use, the clerks are going to use for next week's election. So I appreciate your time, and thank you for having me here today.